We are.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
Okay. This letter is very simple. It was wrote with that intent. It's just reauthorizing the support of not only this board of supervisors but previous boards of supervisors going way back. There's nothing new in it. It's just basically the public process is over. It's a construction site, and all we're requesting is that the construction site be protected for the workers and to move on with the project. I mean, after 14 years of public process, at some point in time, you have to either drop the ball or hit the ball. I mean,
Shh, please. That's really not. That's really not going to help us come to a decision. Not even the decision you want. So it really.
But one important point I'd like to make, Mr. Whatever this board feels on this hour and this day, the construction of the Willis bypass is moving forward. I can't stop it. You can't stop it. It's moving forward. Anyway, so it's really, at this point in time, it's really simple. It is a construction site.
Okay. Other board members, Supervisor Brown.
Thank you, Chair Hamburg. I believe the easement purchases to extend a bypass really started in 1955. I think it was Eddie Schmidbauer that said that easements were placed on his family's ranch back at that time. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, I took part in many, many meetings on the Willits bypass. And it's also along with the late 1990s and early 2000s. I felt very strongly about certain options and supported an alternative that was not selected. I represented agriculture at the time, and I talked about Little Lake Valley and how important that agricultural valley was and the wetlands. More recently in history, I also participated in meetings and discussed proposals concerning a Hopland bypass. So what do you think my message was there? The same thing about our agricultural lands and doing the best job that we can to find a proper location if there is going to be a bypass. So many of you that got up and spoke today, it was like me going back. I think Ellen Drell, David, remember my participation along with Bill Ray, because many times we met and discussed, all the options and strategy and where to go, how to move forward. I do want to see a Willits bypass of some sort, and although what's being built isn't the option I felt was best, my decision here is going to be a very difficult one, but it's for me personally. But professionally, there has been commitments. That's where the final one was. One was no building a bypass. That was one of the alternatives of the time. I can see you shaking your head, Ellen. Yeah.
Please, Ellen. I'm sorry.
I have to go in support to get this done. And so I am going to support the letter brought forward by Supervisor Pinches.
Shh. Over here. Supervisor Drury, Supervisor McCowan, either of you ready to?
This is pretty uncomfortable. So, as many of you know, I have been a member of the Mendocino Council of Government since 2003, and let's go back a little bit in time here. So, in 1997, Quentin Kopp, then a state senator, passed legislation that gave money to the Council of Governments. The Council of Governments are in every county, and they receive transportation dollars beginning in 1998. So, in 1998, the Fort Bragg representative to the Mendocino Council of Governments was, I believe, the only person to vote against funding for the Willits bypass. And because it was the entire allotment, it was the entire $18 million that was going to the one project. After that, the project was in the planning stages, and there was a funding opportunity as the project cost went up for the California Transportation Commission to fully fund the funding gap. And at that point, I was on the MCOG representing the city of Fort Bragg. The Willett City representatives at the time were at least the ones at MCOG, and as far as I always have known, it was the majority of the Willett City Council were in favor of the Willett's bypass. So hearing from them that that was the solution they wanted for Willett's, I voted to support the grant application for the funding gap. It was also it had the support of the supervisor at the time. I believe Supervisor Pinches probably supported it before, but I wasn't in office at that time. And then it was Tom Lucier, and then it was Hal Wagonet, and now Supervisor Pinches
That was
again.
in the last century.
And there was also Supervisor Jim Eddy, who was 3rd District
Okay.
Supervisor at the time when the hearings were held.
So, so I realize from the testimony today that the project has evolved over time, but at the time that it came to MCOG, the request was strictly for funds. And so I voted to support the grant application. In the end, the application wasn't successful, and anyway, there was another funding cycle. MCOG had additional funds, and I did vote to give it money, I believe, twice since I've been on the board. And again, it was under the understanding that it was the clear majority of the Willett's residents. I mean, Alan Drell and some other people, and David and others have gone to MCOG meetings, but you know, you're sitting with other people who are elected from a community, and you trust that they're representing the people who elected them. That said, you know, I understand some of the numbers about the transportation, you know, the numbers on the highway in Willett's, and it's only about 22,000 vehicles a day. A 3-lane highway, 3-lane road, which is 2 lanes, 1 lane each direction, and turn pocket, can handle about 20,000. So it's just barely over capacity. You could easily divert that traffic with connector streets that would parallel Main Street. And so first of all, I want to congratulate and compliment everybody here who has identified sort of some obvious facts, because these obvious facts, for whatever reason, have not been pursued by Caltrans and others. This is kind of difficult because as some people have said, it's not easy to vote one way and then take new information in and look at things differently. I'm kind of uncomfortable at this point, knowing what I know about this project, in signing a letter saying go for the project. That said, I think, as Supervisor Pinches mentioned, I think it's hard for me to imagine a scenario where it's not built, but I also don't feel comfortable signing the letter.
Supervisor McCollum, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if there's ever been an issue of this level of importance where we've heard comment that's been so one-sided, but on the other hand, if the people who are in favor of the bypass had made an organized effort to turn people out, they could have turned out an equal amount or more.
But they didn't.
They're
You know,
working.
it's we listened to you. Please listen to us. Thank you. There's a lot of things about this project that I don't like. It's not the ideal bypass project probably in anyone's mind. I got over the idea a few years ago that there's no Highway 20 interchange, which I think is, you know, not consistent with the purpose of having a bypass. If it's to get traffic through town and around town, you know, it hasn't achieved that to the optimum level. But I also think that a lot of the arguments that we hear are contradictory to each other. You know, we've heard every conceivable argument today against the bypass, and probably 95% of it are the same things that have been said for at least 10 years, in some cases 20 years. But we hear that the bypass won't solve the traffic problem in Willits, and yet, because it's really not going to take that many cars out of town, and yet it's going to devastate the economy because it takes the cars out of town. Both of those can't be true. You know, I am concerned that the alternatives that have been suggested don't really address the problem for US 101. They may address a lot of the problems for Willits, but I don't think they do it completely. And the Bechtel Road, Railroad Avenue route is not really a truck route. It's kind of the opposite of a truck route. It's got 6 roundabouts. It's got traffic calming measures. Roundabouts themselves are a traffic calming measure. So then some say, well, we build the Bechtel Avenue and the railroad, or Bechtel and Railroad Avenue, and then we build a truck route too. And every one of those things you do is going to have its own impacts to the community, and it's going to have direct impacts to the people that are living on those streets that are intended to become the alternate north-south route. And I think and Willits, I think, needs to do some of those things, whether there's a bypass or not a bypass. But when the day comes that you're actually talking about doing those things, you'll see a lot of people stand up and say you can't do it because it's going to have these impacts and these impacts and these impacts. And in fact, that's why a lot of those alternatives were considered and then not included in the EIR, is because of the impacts that they had, including environmental justice impacts of putting a major route through a low-income neighborhood. And you can all shake your heads, but you know that's part of the reality of it. And my concern is that we are not looking at a choice between the ideal bypass and the proposed route. We are looking at a choice between the proposed route and no bypass. And I personally don't find a continuation of the status quo for the next 20 years to be acceptable. And I think that's what we're looking at. So, you know, and supporting the letter, I don't think that supporting it or not supporting it is going to have a direct impact on the project. The project is going forward. It's not a decision that was made by the Board of Supervisors. You know, we are, by supporting this letter, if that's what the board does, it is reaffirming our historic support for the bypass project and the commitment of over $30 million in funds. And you know, they've been spending our money first. I believe over half of it has already been spent on the right-of-way acquisition. And again, if this project doesn't go forward, I think you'll get a continuation of status quo for 20 years with everyone idling through town with the heavy trucks. And the one city, one vision, which I also took a look at, you know, one of the recurrent comments of what people wanted to do was get the trucks out of town. And a bypass is the only way that you get the through trucks out of town. And the comments that 70% of the trucks will still be in town, that was done with someone standing on a street corner writing things down on the back of an envelope. I think that one's going to Fort Bragg. I think that one's going to Eureka. I believe that you'll see far more of the truck traffic will be out of town, and but again, to me, it's not a choice between is there a better alternative or this proposed bypass. It's this proposed bypass or nothing. So I will vote to support the letter.
Well, I have to say that when I saw Senator Evans' letter a week or two ago, I was kind of shocked because I had known that this Willits bypass thing had been in motion for so many years. And, you know, I came on the board in 2011, And the Willits bypass had been around for many, many years while I was not part of county government, and I considered this something basically that MCOG was working on. And of course, you know, at the last MCOG meeting, which was just a week or two ago, there was a letter that was written. I think Supervisor Pinches had a lot to do with that letter, but that was basically to address the comments that had been made by Senator Evans, which seemed to me to be kind of late to the process, just because I knew this had been going on for so many years, and I had always heard, mostly through people who were sitting on MCOG, that, you know, countless you know, different options had been considered, and all these environmental studies had been done, and this and that and the other. And what was really surprising to me just over the last week or so has been at this very late hour, you know, when Caltrans is beginning construction, that this movement has just kind of blossomed. If it's been going on for 10 years, at this kind of level and this kind of scrutiny of the project, I was certainly not aware of that. So I do think there's a real problem, you know, with timing. Now, I wouldn't say that that it's, you know, this way, you know, this highway or no highway, this bypass or no bypass, because I don't know what's going to happen on June 7th when this matter gets to court. I don't know what's going to happen as a result of these very vigorous protests that are ongoing at the site. I don't know what you can do. I don't think that, you know, the Board of Supervisors, and whether, you know, this letter is signed and sent to Malcolm Doherty or not, is going to make a whole heck of a lot of difference in whether the Willits bypass project goes through or not. I do have to say, though, that you know, and I do agree with what Supervisor McCowan said. If you know, if the people who were in favor of this project had brought all their folks together and come down here, they might have made, you know, this was a very one-sided presentation. We didn't hear from the people who were for it, and I'm sure they're up there. And I'm sure there's people who are for it, but I do have to say, though, that I heard so many concerns raised today. I think the overarching concern to me is whether we are building something that maybe would have been appropriate a couple of decades ago. But now, as we're kind of trying to move into this, or at least in my political mind, we're trying to move into sort of this more localized culture, this sort of post-petroleum age. I know it's not going to happen in the next 5 years or even 10 years, but you know, we are trying, if we want to survive, and there were several people who spoke to this, we are trying to create a different paradigm. And to me, this project, as it's conceived, does not contribute to that new paradigm. And I'm really sorry to say that, because I have a huge amount of respect for my colleague from Willits, and I know this is a project that he supports really strongly, and I understand his support. And I've talked to other people in Willits who are big supporters of this project. None of them made it down here today. I'm not totally sure why. But, you know, there was a kind of, you know, speaker after speaker after speaker after speaker today that I think finally wore me down. And I'm not sure that nothing can be done. And so it's in that spirit that maybe something can be done to make this project more in keeping with the kind of vision that I have for the future of Mendocino County. You know, I'm not a Willits person. I'm not a Little Lake Valley person, but I I know what you're talking about. I understand the language you're using when you talk about trying to create a different opportunity for generations to come, and also the very real thing that's happening, which is an overall alarming deterioration of our planet on every level. And those things speak very dearly to my heart. And so I'm inclined to join my colleague from the 4th District. So with that, do we have a motion on the floor?
I'll make the motion, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
we have a motion from
To send the letter.
Supervisor Pinch to send the letter, and a second.
I can second.
And a second from Supervisor Brown. And any further comments from board members?
Well, like I say, the project is underway. It's the area of the construction site is secured. All this letter does is basically reaffirm the previous board's supervisors and MCOGs and the city of Willet's commitment to the project. It's a very simple letter. I mean, there may be changes. It might be stopped at the court hearing in June. I mean, who knows? But all this letter does, but what was important to me is to make sure that the project site, I mean, and you know, we talked about through MCOG, and Dan, you've been on MCOG a long while. If we can't plan and design and go through the environmental process of projects anymore, we're always a state. Our Congress, or our state Senate just approved $8.6 billion spending plan the same week that Noreen Evans sent this letter to, in the same week. And if we can't move forward with projects, whether you like them or you don't like them, and have 14 years of process, and then finally decide, yes, we want to do it, where are we? Why should we have MCOG if planning and moving project forward aren't there? If you don't go through that process, then why don't we abandon MCOG or abandon the local projects? Did you see how we get to the date of construction? Well, we've committed the money, but let's wait and see if we're going to do anything. I mean, is that the type of process we want to set up?
Any other comment?
Well,
Yes, Supervisor Dirty.
I believe in the planning process, and one of the things I believe about the planning process is that you can get community buy-in into a solution to a problem. And clearly today we heard, and we've been seeing in the last week or so, a community that has not bought into this project to the extent that I would have expected.
Well, I disagree, Dan, because I've been through a couple of elections in the Willis Valley, and I always come up on top because of the Willis bypass area. So I appreciate 100 people coming here. I appreciate 100 people come here, but they're not in the majority of the Willis Valley.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second, and we will vote. Oh, Supervisor McCallum?
Well, I
you
just
have a
want to
comment?
say, there was an extended community process, and some people came to the community after that happened, or during while that happened, or they didn't start paying attention until after it happened. But, I do kind of think at some point there needs to be some finality to the process. And so we have remedies if people think that process was in error, if they think that the impacts weren't adequately considered or mitigated, they can file suit and challenge it in a court of law. And that process is taking place. And that's really the appropriate arena at this point for the final decision to be made. But I think it's unfortunate if we have members of the board who back away from a position that they might have had a day ago simply because they heard 50 people speaking to one side of an issue and not hearing both sides of the issue. So part of political courage is the willingness to stand up to a room full of people and vote against what they want. That can be courageous also.
Supervisor Pinchas,
I'd like to call the vote now. I'd like a quick question.
you want to call the vote?
Well, I don't think we have the majority here.
Wait a second.
Mr. Chairman, I want to call for the vote because I think it's too late in the day to ask for a political contribution.
That was a joke.
That was
Okay.
a joke.
You,
Okay.
John-
I don't want to go into this anymore. I don't want to hear any more jokes. I don't want to hear anybody malign each other's political courage. You know, we all have different ways that we come to our decisions, and you know, I think that my decision has every bit as much validity as any other supervisor's. You know, it's all based on my experience, my life, the things I've learned, the people I've talked to, the things I've read. So, you know, we all have to live with our decisions. So, vote by the button. And the motion
passes.
carries
With
3-2.
Supervisors Hamburg and Jurdy dissenting.
Okay, and where are we going now?
Mr. Chair, I think it might be time to
Thank you
do,
all for being here today.
Supervisor Brown's CSAC item.
The directors,
Please. Please, 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 please.
No, we have to finish this.
we do have item 5G, which is presentation regarding the donation of 6 historical state of California
That's-
maps.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we're going to put that item off until Mr. Beltrami
Right.
can be here.
Mr. Beltrami was not available.
Oh.
The next item would make sense to do the CSAC item and then the reports. We have closed session, and
Could I please ask if folks would take their conversations outside?
Directors report, transportation.
Okay. It appears that
Okay.
Supervisor Brown wants to move to the director's report, and then I'd say that I just don't want us to forget the CSAC item. So-
Right.
And we have to be in closed session before 5:30. Is that right? Yeah.
Before 5:30.
So,
Okay, I've sort of lost track of the agenda here. Okay, here we go.
I just marked everything.
we have 6B, which is the CSAC item. And then we've covered everything except the reports, the CEO supervisor reports, DOT report.
We had 5A, 5B.
Right. So we had all of our proclamations.
I.
And then, Mr. Chair, according to the script, 6B would be CSAC, since the presentation on the maps for Mr. Beltrami will not occur today.
Well, I think the main thing we have is item 6B.
With
Right.
me, I mean, you know, rest of reports.
Yeah, so do you want to
Right.
proceed with 6B?
Sure. It's
Thank
just
you.
fine with me. I brought this forward because I learned last week, I believe it was Monday, late afternoon, evening, or Tuesday morning perhaps, that the CSAC Board of Directors will hold a special meeting, and it will occur by conference call this Thursday. And it has to do with the Health and Human Services Policy Committee, Medi-Cal Optional Expansion Principles. So I very quickly got together an agenda item so I could bring it forth to all of us here, because as I previously reported, CSAC did not take a position on principles at their meeting on February 22nd, I guess it was, due to the fact that many of the representatives around the table, the directors, felt that there should be perhaps a third option looked at. As you know, and as the backup information tells you, that there is a county option and a state option right now. And then there are some good summaries. And I will say each of us have about the same level of knowledge and have gone through the same level of presentations, except perhaps Supervisor Pinch's on this particular issue. It is very huge, and actually RCRC had quite lengthy comment on it within their report that I'm not going to say I enjoyed reading, but it was of interest. So I copied the agenda item that we will have our special meeting on, and for all of you to go over and consider. And the action item is basically to adopt the Health and Human Services Policy Committee principles of the Medi-Cal optional expansion, and also implementation of the Federal Affordable Care Act. So I don't know if now our CEO, I believe she has been sitting on a special group. We've had a working group within our county, or locally here within the county, as appointed by the CEO, and they listen in to one or two working groups that have been taking place. So I don't know if anyone else has comments. This is the recommendation that comes from CSAC staff, and I'm not going to say any more.
And the recommendation is basically reflected in this memo from Matt Cade and Kelly Lindsay,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Okay, and you're saying that you support these principles and you support the, I don't know, there's kind of a part one and part two.
Well, it's very difficult because each of, any way you go, we cannot do a county option. I mean, that, maybe LA can, but certainly we can't. And even the state has liability and risks. I would like maybe our CEO to chime in.
Mr. Chair, if I'm okay with you, yes. There really has been a tremendous amount of work so far on this particular item. And I think that because our state is so big, which we all know, the counties are so diverse, I think that CSAC has had a very difficult time coming up with one option to present to their board of directors and then to recommend to the state. And they've gone through multiple options, and at this point, what they've gone to is basically guiding principles. And my recommendation would be that Supervisor Brown have the authority to make the decision for this county when she is either, I don't know if you're doing the phone call or if you're actually going to a meeting.
No, it's going to be done
Right.
by conference call.
But I would say to follow the CSAC recommendation at this point, agree on the principles, and then allow Supervisor Brown the flexibility that should in the course of the phone conference something change, she could use her best judgment. This is really a moving target on the Medi-Cal expansion and on the federal health care reform. So that would be my recommendation. My staff and myself have been intimately involved in the discussions, in the phone conferences, in the meetings. We've met as a CIO group. There's a lot going on. I'm not certain eventually how this will all roll out, but based on what I know, that would be my recommendation.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move approval of the CEO's recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to go with the CEO's recommendation that Supervisor Brown be authorized to vote for the county at CSAC regarding the Medi-Cal expansion principles. Supervisor Brown?
Thank you, Chair Hamburg. And one other comment, we will be having a full presentation to the board sometime in April. So, it'll give us more of an opportunity to hear what is going on, what has happened, what is being looked at, where we're going from here. Because really there's no option other than to get it implemented by January 2014.
Okay, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. CEO report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the interest of time, The board has a hard copy of my report. There may be hard copies in the back. If not, they're in the executive office, and the CEO report is online. Our sheriff talked about tsunami testing this morning. We do have some additional training happening through the Office of Emergency Services Incident Command Training. That's in my report. I think one thing to note is the relocation of the Court Collections Office. Effective May 1st, Mendocino County Court Collections will be located in the Treasurer's Office here on Low Gap. There is some remodeling that will be completed, and we don't anticipate a break in service, an interruption in service, or a reduction in service. Let's see. I think I will continue on here. We know we still have the state of emergency with our Doris Street facility, and we do have a web page for that. And you could go on, the public could go on and find out the latest information on the Doris Street flood. The county communication plan, the actual plan that came back from our consultants is attached to the report. And I think the only other thing, in the interest of time, Supervisor Brown mentioned the healthcare reform information presentation. That is happening on Monday, April 8th at 1:30. We are inviting our community partners. Tuesday, April 9th is the annual fee hearing. And along with my report, you have the tsunami test public service announcement, the communication plan, and you also have the Red Cross training flyer, which I have to say I'm very proud of our staff working with the Red Cross to set up these trainings for all of our 1,000 county employees. It's a community disaster education training. It's a 1-hour training. We're offering that this happen on county time. It's a benefit to our employees personally in their lives, to be certain that they have more information to ready their families in a disaster, and also because all county employees are disaster service workers, we feel that having our staff trained will help us best respond should there be any type of event. And with that, that is my report, unless there are questions.
Any questions for the CEO? Okay, if not, supervisor reports.
Yes.
Supervisor Brown, you want to start?
Sure. I did have Austin Morris on my supervisor's report, but I'm so glad that our congressman recognized him. And it is called, he was selected for the Humanitarian Youth Honoree by the American Red Cross, and he will be honored on Thursday, April 18th. And I'm not, it's at a Real Heroes Breakfast, and I think it's in Santa Rosa, but I'm not really sure.
Mr. Chair, yeah, that's the annual Heroes Breakfast that the Red Cross puts on. It's at 7:30 in the morning, the third week in April, and it is, I believe, still at the Doubletree in Ronert Park.
So anyway, the Inland Water and Power Commission has asked that everyone be polled to have an all boards meeting, and it will be a presentation to establish the communications program. And I can't remember if I reported it before, but each of the member agencies are being asked for an extra $1,000 to get the website, educational website up and going. And on May 9th, they want to do a presentation on just exactly what that's all about and what the plan is that IWPC's been making or establishing. So that's May 9th, and I think it's the second Thursday of May. It will take place at the Conference Center, City of Ukiah. So please look at your calendars. All boards means all boards.
What time?
It would be this, I believe they're going to make it a little bit earlier, like at 5 or 6 p.m. We usually meet at 6 p.m., so I'm not sure if they can change that with a special meeting or not. I think they can. CSAC just came out with information on their legislative conference. It will be held the end of May. Wednesday, May 29th and Thursday, May 30th, and it will be in Sacramento. Reservations are to be made. All the policy committees will be meeting. There will be special presentations, and this whole deal on healthcare probably will be a very big topic there, along with MAP 21. I did receive a memo from Fishnet 4C, but it came in well after the fact. But there was a message that Senator McCain had filed an amendment on the Senate. It's called CR, so I'm not sure what that means in Senate talk. Maybe our former congressman can tell us.
Continuing resolution?
Okay, that strikes funding for Pacific Coast salmon recovery. So I need to look into that, and we'll be doing that because it caused me great concern. But Supervisor McCowan and I did talk, and we really feel no one else would support it. They must, and as Supervisor McCowan said, they must not eat salmon in Arizona, which I thought was a good comment. It was great to announce that the California Boating and Waterways Commission announced $3.7 million in funding for boating facilities, and that's in Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Mendocino County. So our lake, Mendocino, the South Bay Boat Launching Facility, was approved with a $1.4 million grant, and it'll be for improvements to the Lake Mendocino launching facility. And the planned improvements include the construction of a new parking area and addition of 63 parking spaces, which is really great because people are having a hard time finding parking places during the peak of the seasons. I also was asked and did write a letter as the first district supervisor to support the Mendocino County Promotional Foundation, and they were making a proposal to USDA Rural Business Enterprise Grant, and this is for the establishment of the Mendocino County Farm Trails Map and associated program. And the concept is it'll increase awareness of the unique character of Mendocino County farms, nurseries, wineries, and restaurants, bring locals and visitors alike to these businesses, and will result in startup or expansion of new or existing businesses. So I do have more information on that. If anyone would like to read about the program, I'm happy to provide it. Last week, Area Agency on Aging they were sending around dates for a special meeting, and it is being called for an appeal of the termination, I talked about this last meeting, for the contract providing food services by the Lucerne Alpine Senior Center. My last report addressed the State Department of Aging's audit of our PSA 26, which is called for Lake and Mendocino County. And basically, the program was, that they have there, the food service program, was critically out of compliance, and basically the state said the contract needed to be terminated. And this has been ongoing since about 2005. And so the process is going through, and they have the right to appeal it. If the appeal is denied, there is a plan to continue those food services for the seniors at the center and all the deliveries, much like what Plowshares does. There's a plan, an emergency plan in place, and that will probably also be presented since we will be meeting that senior center. But I thought I'd better give you a heads up because it is a very emotional issue in the Lucerne area.
Thank you. Johnny, go
You've
ahead.
heard enough of the third.
Supervisor Jurdy.
Well, I just included on the website, I guess, and it's in the packet, is the first of my monthly columns for the newspaper in Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg Advocate News graciously letting me publish a column about things that I think are of interest on the coast and with the county, and so that's the first of them. And at the League of Women Voters, which maybe you were going to touch on this, but they hosted their annual meet and greet with elected officials, the Sheriff Allman was there, you were there, I was there, Susan Ranchek, county clerk, the treasurer was there, and anyway, so it was good crowd, good turnout, and I had a chance to talk to the League of Women Voters about the possibility of co-hosting. CEO Carmel Angelo wants to give a presentation in the 4th district, and they would be happy to co-host it. So, I've been attempting to get tours of all the county departments, and most recently, I think it was last Friday, I toured the district attorney's office, had a really good conversation with the district attorney and his staff, and really came away, although I don't really know how he deals with prosecutions, because I didn't really get into that kind of a conversation, but I did come away thinking that he's very concerned about the taxpayers of Mendocino County and trying to run his office in a cost-effective way. So that was my main takeaway from that conversation. So I was impressed with the district attorney, and I think that's it.
Roger McCowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, mental health court is still working its way forward, and at the last meeting just over a week ago, Judge Mormon gave her opinion that she thought a referral was imminent. It may have been made already, but if not, shortly we will have the first referrals to mental health court, which is not being called mental health court, it's being called the Thursday 11 a.m. calendar. But that is very close to getting off the ground. It'll be a pretty modest program initially, but we're optimistic with the commitment of all the people involved that it will be successful, and they will be able to keep adding new people in. And I think everyone's pretty excited to see that finally on the brink of getting going. So,
May I make a comment that I think the people that supported and pushed for Laura's Law in this county, I think it's a real win, because this is what a result is coming. Those discussions really come with a result. Maybe not the result they wish for, but it was because of those folks that supported Laura's Law. This is kind of the result that it happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think it's a real positive result.
correct.
And just sort of, did you have other?
No, that's.
Just sort of, jumping off from Supervisor McCowan's comment, the Mental Health Board did meet on March 20th, which was last Wednesday, I guess. And Judge Brennan came to the meeting. And Judge Brennan, of course, is going to be Judge Mormon's counterpart in the 10 Mile Court. And he got a lot of good vibes from the Mental Health Board for being there and for being so really interested in the mental health court and what the mental health. He actually he knew about it, and he knew that he was going to be part of it, but there were a lot of details that we provided for him about having the case managers and about what the services were, and we actually were able to flesh out his understanding, and he was extremely open and gave everybody his cell phone number and wanted to talk further. So that was good to touch base with Ann Mormon's counterpart. One other thing I want to say about the MHB is that our membership has really increased. We have some very good new members from around the county. A new one who will be voting on soon from the 3rd District, who attended her first meeting last week. So we've just about filled, well, we haven't filled all the vacancies, but we've filled, in fact, like in the 3rd District, where we've had 3 vacancies, we now soon we'll only have 1, which is good. And I think we have 1 in the 1st and maybe 1 in the 4th. But it's not only just filling those, yeah.
And there's a process different that you go through. And my nominee, it takes a while.
Yeah.
Didn't get notified at the last meeting.
Okay.
So, and that's Judy Judd.
Okay. Well, she's got to contact Terry Rogers at Mental Health.
She had been in contact, and also Jim Shaw?
Well, Jim Shaw's the chair. And Terry's the staff.
Right, and she had been in contact, but nobody, evidently she wasn't on the email and that was in Fort Bragg, correct?
Okay. The last meeting was in Fort Bragg. Yeah, Carmel?
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, what we've been doing is if there is someone who wants to sit on one of the boards, a supervisor nominates, and it's usually through the clerk of the board that we notify that person that the mental health board is meeting, so that we could get that person to the mental health board. And then after that, then once the mental health board weighs in, then they get appointed. So I don't know if Judy Judd's application came into our office or not, but in the future, that would be the best way to handle it, to make sure that it gets to the clerk, and then we could follow through to make sure they get to the meetings they need to get to.
I didn't know it was the clerk's office that did it. I thought it went to mental health advisory, and then the board that's there does a whole interview with the person.
If it gets to the clerk of the board's office, then they get notified. I don't know what happens when it goes out to the departments, but I can assure you when it gets here, we notify them of the meetings.
And Supervisor Jurdy attended the meeting of the Mental Health Board. What'd you think? Is it interesting to you, or?
It was interesting. I only was there for the morning session, then I had another meeting in the afternoon. But
Yeah.
Did
That's right. You went and covered for me in Mendocino.
Did Jay Holden make it?
No, he didn't.
Okay.
No, but it was a very good meeting. Just really briefly, we had a meeting of the Broadband Alliance, our regular Friday meeting. Scott Adams from Comcast actually came, which was great. Showed a lot of nerve to walk in the room, because we're always, going after Verizon and Comcast and AT&T. And I have to say, Scott Adams, stood up and took it like a champ. Had a lot of discussion about what's going on with our Route 1 corridor project, and appreciate Supervisor McCowan a couple of times today bringing up the CASF grant, California Advanced Services Fund grant, for the 16 county Golden Bear broadband. We also had an interesting exchange with Mindy Kate, our new county librarian. She's still new, yeah. And she came to the Broadband Alliance and talked about the problems that she's having with the with broadband, getting high-speed broadband into all of their facilities, including the Bookmobile, which is not online yet, but it will be eventually.
No wonder they smiled when I talked about that.
Also, Steve Turner was there from MCOE, talking about the Caltrans Environmental Justice Grant application that's been made by MCOE, and that is a interesting educational program that MCOE wants to do, just to get do data collection, evaluation of existing broadband availability and cost, surveying 7th to 12th grade students, school staff members, anchor institutions, etc. So that's something that has been to MCOG. I think MCOG approved it 7-0. So it's good to see MCOE sort of part of the Broadband Alliance and attending the meetings, and that's all I need to do on that. Supervisor Jurdy and I attended the meeting on Friday that was hosted by the Food Policy Council. Cliff Paulin introduced many people around the table to Congressman Huffman. Terry DeSelke was there representing the schools. God, who else, Cliff? Chuck Morris, of course, was there. Anyway, it was a good discussion of the Farm Bill, and Congressman Huffman does seem to really have a feel for the kind of local agriculture that we're trying to promote here in Mendocino County, and I think he's going to be a good friend. We talked quite a bit about the meat project, the slaughterhouse project, and he's very supportive of that, of course. So. Lastly, on Monday, First Five met. I just want to mention that next month is Child Abuse Prevention Month. We'll be having a proclamation before the board. There are several events that are going to be happening around the county. Project Sanctuary is doing Walk a Mile in Her Shoes on the 27th. There's going to be a luau on May the 4th. On May the 3rd, which is a benefit at Barra Winery for early childhood education. And I've already heard that Supervisor McCowan is going to be on hand for that. wearing his full Hawaiian getup. Is that right? That was the rumor going around at First Five. And Day of the Child in Anderson Valley on the 4th of June, which I'll be attending. And here is the handout for the luau in case anybody else wants to see Supervisor McCowan in his Hawaiian getup. I certainly did.
I might add that they also do a walk around all the businesses advertising the month. And I'm not sure what date that's going to take place, but that's usually coordinated through the Policy Council on Children and Youth.
Right.
And then
Right.
they
Good
hand
point.
out flyers and posters
Right.
and information
Let
throughout.
me just hand these around, just so everybody can glance at one. This is. So that's my report. And I'm sticking to it.
Okay.
Okay, so is that it? We just go to closed session?
Yes, I'm not certain if there was a DOT report that you wanted to comment on.
Sorry.
But I can tell you, we must get into closed session before 5:30. Closed session will be 30 to 60 minutes, and then we'll report out. So,
No break.
for your benefit. Okay.
Well, we will take a few minute break, but we need to go to the DOT report.
Don't we normally just accept it?
Well, is that what you want to do? Is there anything in the DOT report that any supervisor would like to comment on? Okay. Okay. Motion to
direction.
accept in a second, so.
By direction.
By direction. Anyway, by order of the chair, we will accept the the DOT report. I'm feeling a little rummy. I don't know why. Yeah. So with that, we will be adjourned to closed session. Let's take at least a 5-minute break before we stumble into into our closed session room. We just completed a closed session during which we gave advice to council regarding federal legislation and also gave advice to council sitting as the Air Quality Management District Board of Directors, gave advice to council as to handling the employee performance evaluation for the Air Pollution Control Officer.
And I think you may have said federal
Federal
legislation, but it was litigation.
Oh, I'm sorry, litigation, not legislation. Okay, and with that, we are adjourned for the day.